Last week we made this bulletproof crankbait, which has zero wood and everything is plastic. Even the finish is a plastic wrap. So we're moving on now to the next lure, and this lure is going to be all wood. Every bit of it, except for the metal hardware. But it's going to be a wooden body and a wooden dive bib. We're going to make a wobbler. Check it out. So I know what you're thinking. This doesn't look like any kind of wobbler. This thing looks like some funky popper. But it's not. It actually is going to be a crankbait with a dive bib. A wobbler for me is a lure with the dive bib that's sort of part of the body shape. Kind of like those Lazy Ike lures I made a few months ago. Here's a few photos. So I'll have to cut along a line that looks a lot like that. And now it starts looking like something you can cast out and crank back. So to get started, we need a block of wood. And this is camphor. I've worked with it a lot on these videos. And we need to go out to the lathe. And that's the beauty of these, is that it's really difficult to screw it up because the lathe imposes the symmetry that's so important in a crankbait. And then it's just up to us to place that tie-on eye right in the middle and right in the right spot along the line of that dive bib. All right, we're really close to being round. I got one little flat spot on here, but now I need some sort of guiding drawing. And usually what I do is I draw it on a piece of masking tape and stick it to my tool stand. And this way it's right there in front of me. And you can see right here, I have an old one from the last lure I made on this lathe. This way I always know where the start and the end is. All I gotta do is align it with the little end mark, and I'll always have it aligned where I want it. All right, that's a pretty close shape. I'm gonna go ahead and start sanding and smoothing out some of these areas, and then we'll get to the next step of cutting our lip. All right, looking pretty good. All right, it'll end up being about 4.5 inches after I do my cut. I know that I want my bib to be about 3/16 thick at the very end. And really, it's difficult to screw this up unless you just make a terrible mistake cutting it. And I'm gonna rough a line in here where I've made all these scribbles. And what I'll do is I'll set this down on a hard spot, take my saw, and try to follow that line the best I can. All right, hopefully this saw will do the job. It's just a matter of eyeballing the first few strokes and make sure I'm sort of lined up where I want to be lined up. All right, so it's still pretty rough right now, but it pretty much matches my original concept. Now I need to cut the tail block off, and then I'm going to sand this so it's nice and smooth. You can see it's pretty rough, and I need to narrow this tip down. And I'll do that on the belt sander. So now I got a really nice, smooth, flat surface coming all the way back to the beginning of the body here. And then you can see these are really hard edges and corners. So that's a matter of just hand sanding to get these hard edges off and round this off nice and neatly. So I'll start off with a 120 grit sanding block. And The idea is just to take that really hard edge off. So the next step is to place the location of the tie-on eyes, the two hook eyes, and the actual eyes. And on a lure like this that has a lip angle that's really meant to dive kind of deep, I like to put my tie-on eye about 2/3 of the way up from the very end of the lip. So on this one, that would be somewhere around 26 millimeters. And then I just need to mark the very center so I'm sure that I got a good position for that tie-on eye and I get a good retrieve on this thing. I like to place my belly hook as far forward as I can get it without having it foul on the lip or on the line. Somewhere around here I can see that it can't reach. We'll make some quick work of twisting these eyes. I've already got 2 of them done. All right, I got it really nicely sanded down, and then I dipped it in some Minwax polyacrylic just to give it a good seal and give me a smooth surface to paint on. And that's what it looks like. .35. And that information is useful because I already know the density of this wood. So I'm just going to take the weight and divide it by the density, and that'll give me the volume of this lure. And that tells me how much it displaces in water. And I know that water weighs 1 gram per milliliter, and that'll tell me how much weight I actually need to put in here. Now I don't really care about the balance on this too much. The weight is going to go as close as I can get it to the center of rotation, or where I imagine the center of rotation is going to be. And it's going to be a traditional lure with sort of a high flotation, like most crankbaits that just kind of shoot up pretty quickly to the surface. So I'm not going to put a whole lot of weight in it. I'm going to put about half as much as I would need to get it to suspend in the water. So I should probably be clear on this. This is kind of an experimental lure because while I've made a few of these type lures, in fact I have one around. Here's one right here. And I've caught a lot of trout on this. It's a nice little lure. But I've never made one this shape. The ones I've made in the past have been narrow bodied with a relatively small dive bib and angled pretty steep, so it doesn't dive very deep. This, on the other hand, is designed to dive deep. It's got a big bulbous body, so I'm not really sure what it's gonna do. To be honest with you, I hope it looks good, and I know it'll dive deep, but I don't know what kind of action we'll get on it. That'll do it. It's about 12, just under 12 grams, which should give me just the right amount of weight where this thing will perform real nicely, cast a long way, and float to the surface pretty quickly, but not so fast that it looks really unnatural. All right, so we're at a critical point. I don't want to finish this thing until I test it. Now, normally, I'm pretty cocky about making lures and not testing them until the very end after I've got them painted and everything. I'm not really sure how this thing's actually going to behave in the water. So I think on this one, we're going to have to do a little bit of water testing before we move on. And I'll put some little weights to simulate the hooks, and then we'll go test it. So let's get down to the dock. All right, we're down at the lake. It's really breezy out at the end of the dock and really bright. The wind ripples will probably make it difficult to see down into the water, so I'll do my best. Here goes nothing. Wow, it dies really quick. Wow, what a weird action. What the heck is it doing? Wow. It's a weird combination of sort of porpoising and wiggling. But you see it porpoise? What the heck? So, I'm not really sure what's causing that. Typically what I'll do is I'll modify the tie on eye. I'll either move it down or up when the action is sort of either weak or strong, but this is just weird. I'm gonna try to bend this wire up a little bit and see if it helps. So now the wire isn't as far down. No, actually that made it a little worse, I think. What a weird action. All right, let's go back to the shop. I think I have an idea. All right, well, we did see a difference when I bent that tie on eye back, and that's usually what I do. I usually play with a tie on eye location when I'm having issues with action, but when I bent it up, it actually got worse. So maybe if I go down farther, I'll get some better wobble action. So I'm gonna pull this tie on eye out just a little bit and then put a drop of glue on it, and we'll give it another shot. Okay, so that's what it looks like now. I've pulled it out probably 1.5 millimeters. When you get this far down the lip, you can really run the risk of just completely discombobulating your lure, and it becomes so unstable that it's almost impossible to tune it. But I'm looking at the lure and thinking what's different from any other crankbait, and of course this lip is the real big difference. It has this rounded sort of chin on the very bottom, and that might be a problem, because what actually makes a lure wobble is vortexes. What happens is you have high pressure here, low pressure here, and vortexes forming behind the lip. And when those vortexes pop off, there's an equal and opposite reaction, because that's like a little ball of energy, and that drives the lure back and forth. But I got a feeling that this rounded surface is just a little too aerodynamic and is sort of killing our vortex energy, right? First, I'm gonna go ahead and try this extended tie on eye, and then if that doesn't work, we might have to get a little more radical. Let me go down to the dock. I'll try this again. If it works, then I'll film it and I'll show it to you. If it doesn't work that great, then we'll be right back here thinking of what's next. All right, so I went down and I tested it, and it did improve it. It did make a minor improvement, at least from what I could tell. It's really hard to keep it near the surface. It wants to dive like crazy, but it still has that weird little sort of jerky porpoising movement. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remedy that. I will give it one more try. We'll go ahead and take a bunch of meat off this dive bib. All right, so I'm going to use the tie on eye itself to get it fastened down in here, get the extent of how far I'm going to go kind of marked out, and then I'll get a power tool on this thing. I'm not sure exactly what. When you do a modification like this, that's this radical, your odds of making things worse is probably higher than making things better. But this is an experiment that really, if it works, it's really gonna pay off, because I'm gonna learn a little something about this kind of lure design. All right, so definitely flattened it out quite a bit. I might take a little more off the sort of left side a little bit, just to make sure I didn't add another problem to it, and then we'll take it down to the lake. All right, I have no idea if this is gonna work. Oh my God, it fixed it. I can't believe it. Look at that. Nah, it's got a good wobble to it. All right, it actually worked. This thing is loose, so so it's a little wacky because it's not really balanced. See, this thing will turn, but we'll fix all that. Let's go in and get this thing painted up, and then we'll do some real underwater shots. So, pretty stoked. I'm really as surprised as probably everyone that actually worked. That's a happy ending right there. You can see what a big change to that shape with the loss of that sort of rounded back chin there. So now this puts me in the mood to put a little bit of a more special finish on this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and do 3D foil scales with this. And if you've never seen me do that, I have a full tutorial and I'll put a little link above me. All right, we're ready to start putting a finish on this. First thing I want to do is put a coat of opaque white, and then I'm going to cover that with a really nice coat of pearlescent white. Alright, I'm going to use this little plastic template to add an opaque yellow stripe. This looks kind of weird and sloppy, but it'll all come together when I put the next step on there, which is going to be the 3D foil scales. Alright, I'm pretty happy with this. Alright, we're going to start off with some transparent blue. Alright, now I'm going to darken the top a little bit with this transparent midnight blue. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of a black top on it. Not much. I want a little bit here up front to obscure the end of the foil scales. Always like to make the eyes look a little bigger with a little black halo. Alright, so while we have the black, let's go ahead and put a little strike eye on it. Alright, so let's go for a little bit, well actually I'm going to do quite a bit of fluorescent orange on the bottom. And now for a touch of red. And I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. It's got a kind of an armadillo kind of effect with the aluminum scales. And I'll probably do 2 clear coats on this thing, maybe a third even. But then my plan is to go ahead and get back on the boat and get out on the lake and get some underwater shots of this. Alright, it's time to go ahead and get this thing set up, and we'll be back to see how it turns out and get it out on the water. All right, it's been about an hour and a half, which is plenty of time. All right, this thing is looking really nice. Nothing left to do but put some hooks on it and head out to the lake. Really like the way it came out. All right, I've got it coming in straight, and you can really see it really digs. I have a hard time getting it to stay to the surface. Well, I'm pretty happy with the action. It's still a little quirky, but it works pretty well. It dives like crazy. It's really hard to keep it near the surface for videoing. That's it for this build. I'm going to leave you guys with a parting shot of the smaller version I built a couple years ago and let you see how that one acts underwater. And until next Friday, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone who's commented and asked questions. And speaking of questions, I got a question for you guys. Check this out. You see those two dots? That's where I drilled in to put the lead. I've never seen it bleed through like that, and a weird yellow that I didn't even use. If anybody's seen that, let me know. Put it in the comments, and I would love to know if you guys have had experience with that. So thanks to everybody who's been commenting and asking questions, and anybody who's helped support the channel. And with that, enjoy the underwater footage. I'll see you next time.